All right. How is the font size on this? Should I make this any bigger?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it would make a difference,
Well,
wouldn't it?
okay.
That's better.
All right, is that better? Okay. All right, so hi everyone. Today's session is going to be about using the Gradebook in Brightspace. My name is Carrie Mocyk. I'm one of the instructional designers on campus. Douglas Hemphill is also here. He's one of my coworkers and a fellow ID. And I also think I saw Kathi in here too. Most of you know who Kathi is.
She is.
I think so.
No, she is.
Oh, okay. All right. So when moving the courses from Blackboard to Brightspace, we did find that a lot of faculty had issues with their gradebook with the course copy. Today, we're going to kind of walk through the gradebook and go over how to set it up for the semester and identify issues that might be going on with the gradebook. And we'll show you some of the fixes that we can work through in this session. You know, everyone's course is very specific, so this is going to be a general overview of it. It may be best to work with one of somebody on the DLE support team to help in particular cases. One of the things that we do know is that while fixes can be made after the fact, it is best to start with planning and initial setup for the gradebook to try to get it as close to being correct as possible at the beginning of the semester before grades are entered. Yes, it can be fixed in most cases, but it does get complicated in different scenarios. Should you need to make changes to the gradebook after the class has started, and particularly if you're working with columns in the gradebook that have grades already entered, we really strongly encourage you to contact help@oswego.edu or drop into the daily Zoom office hours. At minimum, before you make any changes, you would want to back up your gradebook, and I can show you how to do that quickly. All right, so let's look. Course tools and going down to grades. Let's first talk about the layout. So we have these 4 different tabs up here. Manage grades is going to be where we're going to spend a lot of time today. The setup wizard is really important at the beginning of the course to run through to make sure the gradebook is set up how you would like. If you do need to back up your information, this is the export button, and you can export it to an Excel spreadsheet using that option there. All right, there is the option to switch between standard view and spreadsheet view. Spreadsheet view is great if you are manually entering grades into the column. You'll notice the difference between the two situations. Okay, let's get started with the setup wizard. Now it's going to list what the current gradebook settings are. And this page here has been helpful as I'm working with faculty on courses to identify, to help ensure that the setup of your one course matches the setup of another course. So you could kind of run through to see if one gradebook is working and one gradebook isn't. You can kind of peek through here to see what might be the issue. But we're going to run through it from start to finish. On this first step, we have the option of choosing between a weighted gradebook and a points gradebook. In this instance, we're going to use weighted just because that's how my course is set up.
So go back 1 sec, Carrie.
Okay.
So just so everybody understands, a weighted gradebook is one where the points don't really matter. It's purely based on how much is a category worth. So you can have 500 points in a category, but that category may only be 20% of your final grade. A points-based gradebook is one where the points do matter, and your final grade is going to be based off of all of the points of the individual items. So, sorry, continue.
No, thank you for that clarification. All right, on this screen, it is probably going to be something that you will just continue through. However, there are instances where the adjusted final grade button may be, you may choose to choose this. This would be an instance where you purposely are waiting to release the grades for whatever reason. So in most cases, you'll probably just use the automatic. However, there are certain use cases to use this button here.
Yeah, usually that would be if you're. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, I missed the initial, I didn't know if you said any ground rules. Can you just ask questions, or do you want us to wait till the end to ask any questions? Because it kind of pertains to the question I have, but.
Usually we're good with playing it fast and loose, so go for it.
Well, on this adjusted final grade, I looked at it, and one of the things that I do is at the end of the semester, just because some of the grading is subjective, what I do is I round all of the final averages up to the next whole number, so that it takes care of any inconsistencies in grading. It gives them a little wiggle room. But I found out when I tried, I thought with the final adjusted grade, I could just put in there the final adjusted grade, but you can't. You got it. When you go in and change stuff, it goes ahead and recalculates the grade according to whatever you do. In order to get the grade adjusted, you'd have to go in and actually change specific grades in order for it to recalculate. So I tried to go in. You know what I mean? I just went in and I said, okay, this kid's got a 97 or got a 92.4, and I adjusted it to 93. So I thought I could go into the final adjusted grade and just put in 93, but you can't. It does a calculation when you put the 93 in.
So you actually have to change this first. And this is most commonly when we would use this is changing the is for rounding. But you also have to change what the student is seeing, if I recall correctly. Let me do some quick testing on a different screen while Carrie continues.
Okay, on this next page, this drop ungraded items, this is a relatively important piece to keep this checked in most cases. So you have the options of students starting with a 0 and working up towards 100, or you have the options of students starting with the A and working down, as they work through the course. Drop ungraded items won't penalize the students for assessments that they have not taken yet. So it just disregards them until you enter a grade in. With this drop ungraded item, you'd want to enter a 0 if the student does not complete the work. So in most cases, drop ungraded items is what you want checked. Maybe at the end of the semester, you would possibly want to change it over to this one here, but as long as you enter the 0s, you'll be fine.
Yeah, broadly speaking. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say
this is one of the fun parts about
of Zoom. Like you can't. It's like an old cell phone. It's like a 2-meter radio. You got to say over and out. Does the due date have any effect on how it calculates? Whether it calculates it? If you say drop ungraded items, does it? If it goes past the due date, does it have any effect? Or is it just across the boards drop to 0?
No,
it's
okay.
There is a different way to do that, but it's pretty niche and kind of complicated. So I really don't want to get it into here. But yeah, the main thing to know is if you mark it as treat ungraded items as 0 at the beginning of the semester, you will have students panicking. So either explain it really carefully or just leave it on drop ungraded items and go to yeah, exactly, Casey. Basically they start with an E and have to work their way up.
Right.
But yeah, best practice is to leave it as drop ungraded items and add zeros as you go, because that gives students the best idea of what their current standing and average in the course is.
The problem I've had with that is if you leave the items that they ungraded items, there's a difference between that and an item with a 0. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what happens to if I have 4 assignments and I have one student that has 0 on all 4 and the other student who has them, but they're not graded?
So if you have it as drop ungraded items, the student that didn't submit to would have a higher average unless you go in and manually enter the zeros. So where this is where treat ungraded items as zeros can come in really handy is if you have a really big class.
Right. So
Right, that's what we have, 100 and something in each one.
okay, now there is also a bulk grading option that if we have time, I can show you.
Okay, that'd be great.
The problem I've had with that switching it from drop ungraded items to treat ungraded items as 0 is if you have students with stuff that's not complete, and when you switch that, then it's going to drop their grade considering the items that haven't been completed, and they're going to go, yesterday I had a 90 and today I have a 50. What happened?
Yep, that's why that's why that's not best practice. That's a way to that's a way to catch anything you missed. But again, the best option is to go through and give zeros as you go. And like I said, there is a bulk way to do that.
For all the people like Mike and I that are using McGraw-Hill, what it does when you set up your assignments and you link it, whenever it goes past the due date, it puts a 0 in for the student until they do the assignment over again. And so in a sense, it does what this gradebook doesn't do, which is, that every other grading system I've ever worked with, if it goes past the due date, it's a 0. It's marked as a 0 until you either change the grade or something happens. But this doesn't seem like it's very.
This one will just flag them as 0. But yeah, we are gonna keep going just so we can get everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No,
problem.
it's fine. It's fine. I just we were getting a little niche there.
All right. So the suggestion is to drop ungraded items. On step 4, we're just going to say continue in most instances.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't the schema that was in there for Oswego have an F in it? I had to go create a schema to have an E.
Doug, you're
I
muted.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
This is part of why we aren't heavily using the schemas. What we're waiting for is a better option to display 2 different schemas. The problem, a different problem, and this just has to do with how the system works, is every schema created pretty much across all campuses shows up here. So that OSW schema was actually not created by us. I'm not sure who created it.
Right.
So,
I created one for us, and I used 2 different grade schemas on the courses. There's an assignment that's it's like a written assignment. I changed the schema for that one assignment to be Oswego, and it shows letter grades, and it gives them an E or an F or an E or A, B, C or whatever. And the other ones, they're just reported as percentages.
Yeah, that
So
you
in a
can
sense,
do,
that's
but
2
it's
different
that
schemas.
but it's that we can't do a page and we can't do points percentage and the letter grade the way we used to be able to. And that's one of the things that we are working on. So the default schema, and the reason that Carrie skipped by it, is that the default schema is percentage. And in most cases that works well. And Linda, we're looking into that. Part of the problem is we don't know who actually created that and how it got into the system, because if you look through that list, it's a lot.
I can tell you who created it is is SUNY did based on the information I gave them. I will go back and on Friday we'll make any necessary changes. I did not realize that they put in F instead of E. They probably thought that I sent them a mistake.
Well, I
Well, I
created,
just created our own and
Right,
used
which
it.
you can do.
yeah, I created one also, but it doesn't carry over to the next semester.
Yeah,
Like a-
because that's not an institutional schema. So you
I have
can
to-
create personal ones, and they should actually go over when you copy the course, but
Yeah, no. Oh, I didn't copy the course. But okay. If I
yeah, when you
I-
copy the course, you can copy your individual schemas.
okay.
But yeah, most of the time we're just gonna leave it on percentage because that everybody understands that. If you want to do something custom with a schema, drop us a line personally and we'll work with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right.
Sorry, we
and
keep stealing your thunder.
I know. Just afraid I'm going to run out of time.
You're fine. It's only 116.
Okay. So step 5 is just how many decimal places to display. Probably leaving this as is works. If you want to change it, you could. And then this is the student view display options. Now, for the moment, I'm going to leave this alone because I want to talk about it on a different screen, but you may choose to remove some of these because it does kind of get
Does that
clunky on
affect-
the screen.
Does it affect all of the grades?
So
Every
this is the
assignment?
default. So this is what students are seeing.
Oh, okay.
I would strongly recommend always dropping weighted grade.
Okay.
The other
Right.
ones are
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
the other ones are fine. That one confuses everybody,
Okay.
including me.
All right. Anything else on this page, Doug?
Not from me. Characters
No.
displayed as a very specific drop down item, so you will never have to worry about that. It has nothing to do with leaving feedback or anything like that. And usually we don't bother with the display calculation grades to users because they don't really understand what they're looking at.
Okay.
But you are saying, Doug, that if you uncheck weighted here, they won't see it in any of the assignments. You don't have to go into the individual assignments and change it, right?
Yep, no, but
That
it's the other
becomes the
way. It's
default.
the other way
Okay.
around. So unless you're overriding the
Okay.
default, they will not see that line that
Oh,
says
okay,
weighted.
great.
That you just kind of sit there and go, well, what's that?
What the hell is that? Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So
Over and out.
all right. So we've set up the wizard. You're going to want to do that at before the start of the semester. And I guess from this page here, since we were talking about it, some of this, you see all this information here that's available to students. That is what kind of, that view isn't very helpful to many. And that was part of that last step of the wizard.
Well, so I'll point out what you're seeing there is your view, not the student view. That's why
Okay, that's,
when you go into personal display options, it's still checked.
yep. So I'm sorry, Kathi, did you have, oh, okay, that's from before. Okay, so what I had done is I was looking at this and let's go back to this page here. I was looking at this and it just seems like a lot of information here. So if you go into these settings, you can change this for your personal display. And I'm just going to leave this as is, and I'll show you what this looks like. Whoops. So this also shows in the student view display options if you wanted to change it here. But if you go through the setup wizard, that's where you'll catch it for sure on that screen there. All right, so I'm just going to close out of this and I'll show you what happened. So now
Oh,
it's just
that's
showing the
nice.
percentage. Okay,
Yeah, I like
all
that.
right. All right, so I'm getting a lot of notes here that's telling me that my gradebook has some issues. Now, there are instances where these notes won't go away depending on how the gradebook is set up, but we're going to try to work to resolve some of these things. In this manage grades, the way that I want you to think about this is to think of each of these rows here as a column in the gradebook. So each of these, I'm sorry, what was that?
Somebody coughing.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Just don't want to miss anything. All right. So looking at this, if you think about each of these rows as a column in the gradebook, when you're deciding what to do with these rows, it may help you in determining what needs to go and what needs to stay. The example that I'm giving here is I'm looking down along in here and I see these blogs and these journals and a survey. Right now they're set up to be in the gradebook. So if I scroll down, along the gradebook, I'd see these items here, but I don't have any blogs or journals or surveys. So I have the ability to delete those out. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Other things that are in here, this association column. This is telling us that it's tied to the gradebook, that you have an assessment that's, you're going to, this discussion is an assessment and you want it in the gradebook. And this is a quiz that is part of the gradebook. There
So,
are
yeah,
instances.
Yeah, I'll just rephrase that slightly.
Okay.
So basically it's saying this actually exists in the course. So the intellectual integrity quiz is a quiz in the course. Sample assignment is a discussion in the course based on how this is set up. And this will become really important when we get to deleting stuff. So sorry, I just wanted to
That's
restate
okay.
that
Just
slightly.
as a point of reference for everybody that's using third-party connections, that association column has no meaning.
It
Okay.
depends on the third party you're using. Some of
Yeah,
them will say
McGraw-Hill.
it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, well, sometimes you'll have something that says, yes, it's associated with an outside tool. Sometimes it'll be blank. Third parties are their own things. Just in general, if you're working with a third party textbook, you're going to be working with them because they do odd things and we have no access to their system.
Right.
So in the case of, say, this group assignment, there is no association. This would be a perfect example, like if you were using, you wanted to create a manual column for, say, this assignment is something that they present in class. And so you're going to be entering a grades in for them. If that's the case, the association column will be empty. Okay. So I guess I'm going to kind of run through this as if I was cleaning up a grade book. I purposely kind of removed a few things so that we could kind of walk through it. So the first thing that I saw when I was looking at this is that these items in blue, they're categories. These categories in blue are not helpful to me. When I go to more actions and delete, which you do have to press delete first, that more actions delete, I can look along in here and just pointing out, if it has an association, it's not going to allow me to delete that column or that row in the gradebook, column in the gradebook. But if I go down to these, I can delete them. Now you do want to be very careful because remember that group assignment, I'm going to put in a manual grade for them. I could very quickly delete this out and it would be gone. So be very careful with those manual columns. But in this instance, I know that these three things I want to get rid of. All right, so let's add a manual column. So I'm going to go to new and then item. And in most cases, you have different options, but we're going to use numeric. And I'm just going to call this the final exam because that's going to be in person. And I'm going to have to manually enter those grades in. And for this moment, we're just going to say okay to that. It's going to show up at the bottom. All right, so I want to put these in different categories. So I have these, an assignment category, but that's the only one that I have right now. I'd like a discussion category and a test and quiz category. So I'm going to go to new and then to category. And I will call this assignments. And I'm going to say that this is going to be 50% of the final grade. Did I call it? I'm sorry, I had assignments, didn't I? I'll change this to discussions.
Are you going to mention short name at some point in here?
We don't recommend using short names because Brightspace has the ability for each assessment to have multiple names. So whenever we can prevent, using those, it definitely has caused confusion. The example that I could give is within content, you could call it quiz 1 with the number 1 in your test and quiz list. You could call it quiz 1 with the number with spelling out 1, and in the column in the grade book, you could call it quiz 1 new, and all of a sudden you have 3 titles for the same quiz. So for that reason, we're not recommending using the short quiz.
So that
short
isn't just a
titles.
mechanism to shorten up the width of the columns in I thought what you could do is take a big name like I do, tell them what it is, and then call it like Q1, just so that the columns would be smaller. Does it do that?
Yes,
That's
you
exactly
can.
what it does,
Yep.
but again, you just got to be very careful because it's
Be
very
careful
easy
of
to
what
get,
you're doing. I got you.
it's very easy to get
got you.
mismatches, and then
Yeah.
you're there playing with the Gordian knot.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, thanks.
All right, so I'll create one more category. I have discussion, so I guess I'll do exams. And I'll say 25%.
So Carrie, I want to touch on the distributions quickly, unless you're going to touch on those later.
Go ahead.
So by default, manually assign weight to the items in the category. That is based on the score. So if you have one quiz that's worth 100 points and one quiz that's worth 10 points in the same category, it will make one worth 10 times more than the other. Distributing the weights that's what the second option does. The first option has you actually go through and assign weights to each item, which does not necessarily match their point value. But most often we use the last option, distribute weights evenly across all items, because usually all your discussions are worth the same, all your quizzes are worth the same. So even if there's a slight point variation, like one's 12 points, one's 10, it'll even it all out. And this is also the one that gives you the automatic ability to have the system drop the highest or lowest grades, although I've only ever seen people use the lowest grades. But if you do that, wait to turn it on until you have at least 3 grades. Otherwise, it doesn't count the first 2 grades because those are the lowest grades. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that real quickly. As you're that's something to keep in mind as you set things up.
But I was going to say, but within the category, it's got to add up to 100%, right?
Actually, it does not.
If you assign them yourself.
Nope, it'll just
Let's
it'll
say
give
that
you
the
an
assignments was
So it'll give you a note that says these aren't adding up to 100, but in the back, it's just interpolating.
Oh,
So
okay.
actually, in the
Okay.
background, I have been keeping an eye on the time, and we are running behind. So I am at this point, unfortunately, going to ask that we hold any further questions until poor
Okay.
Carrie's had a chance to
Till the
finish
end.
her presentation.
Okay, so so the next thing is I've created these categories that I want to use, but now I want to move some of the information into these categories. So for discussion, I can edit here. And I'm going to move that to discussions.
And you can also do this through the bulk edit.
Yep. And that's actually as an assignment. I'm just going to show you a couple times through on this screen here. This was a quiz.
Assignment.
It was an assignment.
I
It's a
thought you had
quiz.
it list. I don't know why I thought you said it was an assignment, but yeah, the title says intellectual integrity quiz. So.
All right. All right, and you see what ends up happening. So once it's inside a category, you'll see that it's indented to demonstrate that. Now there is a way to bulk edit. If I click this super check here and I use the bulk edit, I can change the different categories from this screen here. It's not great on my view right now because I have the size bigger, but that is an option over there just to change the categories from the screen here.
Mm.
All right. All right, then another thing that I wanted to show you under this more actions is the ability to reorder what's here. So let's say I'm really only going to focus on the categories because I definitely have some more cleaning up to do. But let's say they complete assignments first, and then they work on discussions, and then they work on exams. If I reorder it, it's going to present that information here.
Mm.
Sometimes it's kind of helpful, especially when you're cleaning up, to get those things situated first. It kind of shows you what's left of what needs to be rearranged if you're doing it manually, or you can do that bulk edit.
And this changes both the order you see things and the order your students see things.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about bonus and extra credit and averaging multiple grades into one grade column, so an example might be an extra credit assignment that's worth 4 points every week, but at the end you only want to give them one final grade. All of those questions can get complicated and very specific to your course. So for that reason, we can show you a couple things, but generally speaking, it's something that you'd want to ask assistance for. But Doug, what did you want to share?
So go ahead and give me screen share. And I'm just gonna touch on the two main issues of this, which is that I want something that is either not included in the grade book or that it's extra credit. And the big thing to know here is that it depends whether or not you are using a percent-based system or a points-based system. So I'm gonna go and change this to a percent-based system, so weighted system. Now, in this case, anything that I did not want included in the grade book, I would actually create a category. I might call it something like ungraded, and note that I can use my restrictions so that students don't even see this. So this is the gradebook hiding. And then I just make the weight 0. And I can save it, and now I can dump anything in there, and it doesn't affect the final grade because it's worth 0%.
Nothing.
This is also how I handle standalone extra credit for percent-based grade books. Is I'll do the same thing. I'll make it 0, but I will allow the grade to exceed the category, and then I will manually assign the extra credit 5% or whatever is appropriate. Yeah. Cannot type. So that's for a percent-based grade book. If you're using a points-based grade book, it's actually a little bit easier because the system isn't trying to guess how many percent things are versus 100s and all that wonderful stuff. So on any individual assignment, I can just edit the assignment and make it an extra credit assignment, or I can exclude from the final grade column entirely. So if I want an ungraded assignment, that just now it's no longer being calculated into that final grade. Do not click both of these at the same things. It confuses the system and you end up thinking you're doing extra credit and it doesn't do anything. The other way you can do extra credit is you can exceed a point. So let's say this is a discussion. They did a truly brilliant discussion. So instead of 10 points, I want to give them 12 points. However, this will never exceed the category weight. So even if, let's say I turned off my category, so I don't have those. Oh yeah, here I have one. So let's say this is not categories. This is my discussions, and let's say this is worth 25% of my grade. It's looking a little weird because I'm not in a percent-based mode at the moment, but even if they had like 120% in that category, it will only ever count for 25% of the grade unless you have can exceed checked on the category as well. So that is extra credit in a nutshell. But again, if you're doing anything other than basic grade books, or even if it's just your first time setting up a grade book, I would definitely recommend dropping in and having a chat with one of us. So Carrie, I thought the only other thing you might want to show people is what students see for their grades.
Do you mind keep going?
Oh, no, not at all. Well, yes, because I lost the screen I was using, but give me a moment. It's here somewhere. So for students, they are generally going to go my performance and look at either class progress or grades. Class progress is actually the spot where they can get the most information. They don't see this screen. They just go directly to their account. The only thing they need to know here is they really want to ignore the grades option up here and go to the items. So if I go to assignments, I can look at my assignments, and have I really not done any work under that kid? This is what happens when you play with a grade book too often.
No, you're going to fail. The semester's over.
And why we use practice grade books for this, because otherwise I'd really have broken something by now. And apparently I did break something, because normally what I would see is if I had graded work in here, I would see my feedback under here. And this is the one area students can get confused on, is if I go to my grades, I'll see all my grades and I'll see feedback underneath them. And again, I've hidden a lot of stuff from myself, but I'll see a feedback option up here. But that is only if the feedback was entered directly in the grade book. Most of the time, I'll want to go to my assignment or whatever it is, and I'll have an option here to see my feedback. Now, the other place that students can see their feedback is if they go my performance grades. And you can always see what they are seeing by clicking on this pull down and clicking preview. And it will give you a pop-up screen showing exactly what they are seeing. And of course, I forgot that was a pop-up, so I need to redo my sharing. So here you can see the pop-up that I have, and this shows everything that the student has done and what grades they've gotten. So, and if there was feedback for them, that would appear in this column. So that's how students see their grades.
Okay, and I do have my course pulled up. I can show one with feedback. What I was doing was organizing the gradebook to situate it. So I will share my screen again. Just get over to it.
Yeah, unfortunately, my course that I usually use for practice is pretty bare right now because I've been working on designing a course for another faculty member using my practice shell.
All right, so the feedback, this is what they would see. This is in the summary, as Doug was explaining. Sometimes not all the feedback shows on this page here. So going into the
We're not
different,
seeing anything.
I'm not seeing, yeah,
Seeing
for whatever
anything. Oh,
reason,
really?
we're not seeing your screen.
Yeah.
thank you for letting me know.
And I don't know why that is.
Can you see
Jan,
it at this point?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, all right. So I was on the summary page here. Being a summary page, it may not show all of the feedback, but if you, in this case, it actually was. So that's how that looks from there. But if you need to get more detailed feedback, or they're saying they can't see the feedback, going in over here, they can see the rubric and information that might be more detailed information. So using this left toolbar in the My Performance could be beneficial to students if they're unable to see things. All right, circling back to the gradebook, I am not going to say that I've caught everything, but I did kind of go through and clean this up a little bit. And this is more what we're looking for. We already know this association is going to be blank since it's a manual column. You're going to manually enter a grade. Participation is going to be blank. These discussions match the discussion category. The quizzes all are there. This would be blank because it's going to be in person. It looks like I have 2 participation set up in here, and it's actually telling me that because it's 110. It should be equal to 100. So like those are all things that we're looking for as we're trying to work through grade books. Is there anything else that you can think of, Doug, that we should show them?
Not with this, and I did respond to Jan's question privately. I think the biggest takeaway from this is everybody's gradebook really is a unique animal, especially if it's been brought over from Blackboard or otherwise was pre-existing. So largely I would always recommend that you drop in for help. I just posted in the chat the link to our DLE page, which if you scroll down just slightly has our open office hours. Barring sickness or anything like that, there are always at least 2 of us at these office hours. The Zoom link is right there, and we have them every day. And if for any reason you can't get to those, or you just would want a private session, drop a line to help@oswego.edu, and we will work with you to find a time that works.
And I'll add, with the Zoom sessions, we have the ability to take you into what they call a breakout room, which means it's a one-on-one conversation. It's just really open office hours where you can work with us, you know, on any questions or concerns about the course.
We'll take all comers. So we do have about 5 minutes left, so I will open the floor back up to any questions.
Well, I have a question. I noticed that when I go into the content area, and if there's a quiz or a topic or something in there, and I say delete this topic or delete whatever, and it comes up with a choice of, you know, just delete the topic and leave everything, or delete everything associated with everything. Am I correct in my observation that it doesn't remove it from the gradebook? Even if you delete the quiz, it's still in the gradebook. You have to go into the gradebook and delete it there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that there's the gradebook and everything else in the course really are kind of separate animals that talk to each other a little bit. So even if I directly delete a discussion or a quiz or something like that, I'm going to be left with an empty column like the participation column that's up right now, and I will have to manually delete that from the gradebook. There's advantages and disadvantages to that depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, just be aware that you do that. And also, if you are deleting stuff from content, be really careful using that second option, because it will kill everything that is attached to that. So if you like have an extra link to a quiz and you use the second option, it will delete the quiz itself, even if you didn't mean to.
Right.
So just be a little careful with that one. Other questions? Okay, again,
actually, there's
I
one
was gonna
thing.
ask, go ahead, over now.
There
okay,
is
go
one
ahead,
more
Carrie.
thing that I did want to say. If you are trying to delete from here and you're not able to do so, and this association column is filled out, you know, is filled in, you need to go back to the discussion itself, edit the discussion, and untie it from the gradebook. So in each version of assessments, it's done a little bit different, but that is an important piece. So if by chance you're, you know, you've doubled your gradebook or something like that, you would need to unlink them from the gradebook in order to be able to delete these columns in your gradebook.
Okay, I think we have time
Okay,
for
Mike.
one more short question.
All right, mine's not. All I wanted, a really short question. Have you done, or could we get a short presentation list on groups? I haven't
Yes,
started
there
using
is
them yet.
actually one scheduled.
Oh, good.
Tomorrow,
You don't-
maybe?
Tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Okay, I
Yep,
can look it up.
tomorrow at 10 a.m.
All right.
And right after that, we have a redux of viewing the Brightspace course as a student, which is another great session. And then we have our open office hours from 2 to 4. Those are the ones though that you'd need to use that web link to get to. So with that, we are on time. So
All right.
thank you all. Again, I know that is a massive topic, and thank you very much to Carrie for taking
Yes.
it on as the primary presenter. And trust me, when we got a hold of this, which was not that long before you did, we spent a long time banging our heads against the wall, figuring out some of the nooks and crannies of this. And obviously there's still stuff we're looking at. For the one question about the adjusted grade, I got it to work okay, so feel free to drop into office hours and we can look at your own course. But other than that, yeah, just come see us. This is literally one of those times where there is no such thing as a bad question. Because we've probably asked the same question again. Probably to each other, probably while crying. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you again, Carrie. And
Thanks, Doug,
thank you
for your help.
to Jess for running our CELT room. I think that's Jess. I can only see an arm.
All right. Thank you. And like they said, there is another session tomorrow on